Hey everyone, welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going to be taking a look at AMD, trying to figure out, is this a buy, is this a sell, or is this a hold? And we've got a great analyst report that just came out that we're going to be diving into.
Sounds good.
Right off the bat, this report highlights some pretty impressive recent earnings from AMD. They just finished up Q4 2024 with a record revenue of $7.7 billion.
Wow.
Yeah, it actually exceeded expectations by a pretty significant margin, and a lot of that success seems to be driven by their data center and client segments. What I found really interesting is that the report emphasizes AMD's strong position in some really high-growth markets. We're talking about data centers, PCs, and of course the big one, AI.
Yeah, AMD has been doing a really good job of positioning themselves in some of the most promising areas of the tech industry. Like you said, those data centers are just exploding in size and complexity. And then you have the PC market, which is still showing a lot of strength. And then AI is just the big elephant in the room. It's got so much potential to disrupt pretty much every industry you can think of.
Right, and it seems like AMD is really ready to jump into that AI game in a big way.
Oh,
The report actually predicts that they could be pulling in tens of billions of dollars annually from AI-related revenue. Now, whether or not they can actually reach that level of success is still up in the air. I mean, let's be honest, they're going up against some pretty stiff competition. But it's clear that they're taking this seriously.
absolutely. And I think one of the things that AMD has going for them is their diverse product portfolio. They're not just focused on the absolute top end performance like some of their competitors are. They're hitting different price points, offering solutions that are tailored to specific needs. I mean, their strategy is all about the right product for the right workload. And it seems to be working because they're gaining market share in some really important areas. For example, they've surpassed a 50% market share at major
Oh,
hyperscalers.
wow, that's impressive. So, with all of this positive news about AMD's performance and their potential for future growth, it's no surprise that the analyst is giving them a buy rating in this report. They even set a fair value estimate of $146.91, which is significantly higher than their current share price of $108.27. So at least according to this analyst, there's a decent amount of upside potential here. But before we all get too excited and rush out to buy AMD stock, we need to take a look at some of the potential concerns that are outlined in the report as well. Because like any investment, there are always risks involved.
Oh, for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, it's important to remember that the semiconductor industry is notoriously cyclical. What goes up must come down, right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
And one of the things that the report flags is a potential dip in revenue coming up in Q1 2025. They're also seeing a year-over-year decline in their gaming segment. So should we be worried about these trends?
Well, it's not necessarily time to hit the panic button just yet. AMD is actually attributing these slowdowns to a couple of specific factors. First, they're in a product transition period right now, which can always impact sales. As they roll out new offerings, they often see a bit of a dip in revenue. And then second, there's semi-custom sales, the chips that they make for gaming consoles. That took a hit recently because Microsoft and Sony have been adjusting their console inventories.
So basically, those companies are ordering fewer chips right now while they work through their existing stock. So
Exactly.
it's not necessarily a sign of weakness in AMD's products, just a temporary blip caused by external factors.
Right. And the report actually emphasizes that they expect stronger growth to resume in the second half of 2025. And one of the key drivers of that growth is going to be the launch of their MI350 series.
Okay, now you're going to have to explain that one to me. What exactly is the MI350 series?
Well, the MI350 series is AMD's latest line of data center GPUs, and they're designed specifically for AI and high-performance computing. So think of these as the heavy lifters. They're the ones that are going to be crunching massive amounts of data for things like machine learning and scientific simulations.
Right, and AMD is basically betting big that these GPUs are going to be a game changer in the AI space. They're hoping that it'll give them a real shot at competing with NVIDIA, which,
Yeah.
as we all know, is the dominant player in AI chips right now.
Yeah, it's a tough battle to win, but AMD seems pretty determined.
So it sounds like AMD is firing on all cylinders right now. But, they're not operating in a vacuum. We have to consider the competition. We've already mentioned NVIDIA, but we can't forget about Intel either. They're making a comeback. So how does AMD stack up against these giants?
Well, it's definitely a competitive landscape. I mean,
Right.
NVIDIA is still the dominant force, especially in the high-end AI space. And Intel, even though they've had some struggles recently, they still hold a significant market share.
Right.
So investors need to be aware that this isn't a one-horse race.
It's more like a chariot race.
Exactly. Everyone's vying for the lead. And on top of that, beyond just the direct competitors, there are some broader risks that could impact AMD. And really the whole semiconductor industry in general. We're talking about the cyclical nature of the market, the
Yeah.
potential for supply chain disruptions, and then you always have those geopolitical factors looming in the background, like trade tariffs, which can really throw a wrench into things.
Yeah, no kidding. So it's not all sunshine and roses for AMD.
Mm.
But one thing that really stood out to me in this analyst report was the section on analyst price targets. Because it seems like the experts are a little bit divided on what the future holds for AMD.
Yeah, there's definitely a range of opinions out there.
Some analysts are lowering their price targets, citing concerns about potential slowdowns and increased competition, while others are holding steady with their overweight ratings. They're more optimistic about AMD's long-term prospects, especially when it comes to the AI market. So we've got some analysts hitting the brakes while others are stepping on the gas. What does all of this mean for our listeners? You know, the people who are trying to decide whether AMD is a buy, hold, or sell?
Well, that's where you, the listener, comes in.
Yeah.
We've given you the rundown on AMD, their impressive performance, their ambitious plans, and the challenges that they face. Now it's up to you to weigh all of this information and decide what it means for your own portfolio.
Exactly. Do your own research, folks. Think about your investment goals and make an informed decision.
And if you want even more information to help you make that decision, be sure to stick around for part 2 of this deep dive. We're going to be digging even deeper into some of the key details from AMD's recent earnings call and exploring their long-term strategy in more detail.
Sounds good to me. So stay tuned, folks. All right, so we've laid the groundwork, talking about AMD's overall performance and their position in the market. But let's actually dive a little bit deeper into some of the specifics. You mentioned their recent earnings call. What kind of juicy details did they reveal there?
Well, the earnings call gave us a more granular look at AMD's financial performance, breaking down their revenue by segment. They have 2 main segments, computing and graphics, and then enterprise embedded and semi-custom.
Right, right. Can you remind me again what exactly falls under each of those segments?
Sure. So computing and graphics, that includes their Ryzen processors, which, are the chips that power a lot of PCs and laptops these days. And also includes their Radeon graphics cards, which are popular for gaming and other visually demanding tasks. And then on the other side, you have the enterprise embedded and semi-custom segment. That's where you find their EPYC server CPUs, which are the brains behind those massive data centers that we were talking about earlier. And they also make custom chips for gaming consoles like the Xbox and PlayStation.
Oh, right. The chips that go into those gaming consoles.
Exactly.
Okay, so how did each segment perform in the most recent quarter?
Well, the computing and graphics segment saw a pretty remarkable year-over-year increase in revenue, up 58% from the same period last year, which really just highlights the continued strength of the PC market and the demand for AMD's consumer-focused products.
Wow, 58%. That's huge. So people are really snapping up those Ryzen chips, huh?
Yeah, they're definitely a popular choice right now, and I think part of that is because AMD has been really smart about hitting different price points, so they're making their chips accessible to a wider range of consumers.
That makes sense. Okay, so what about the other segment, the enterprise embedded and semi-custom segment?
Well, that segment also performed really well. They saw a 69% year-over-year increase in revenue, driven primarily by strong data center sales. But this is also where we see that dip in gaming revenue that we talked about earlier. That decline is primarily coming from this segment, mostly because Microsoft and Sony are adjusting their console inventories right now.
So those gaming console sales are actually having a pretty big impact on AMD's overall revenue.
Yeah, it's more significant than you might think. I mean, the data center business is definitely growing rapidly for them. But those semi-custom chips that they make for consoles, they still represent a sizable chunk of their revenue. So when a company like Microsoft or Sony decides to adjust their inventory, it kind of ripples through the entire supply chain.
Right, it's all connected.
Exactly.
So it seems like AMD is benefiting from this huge wave of growth in data centers, but they're also exposed to the ups and downs of the gaming console market.
That's a good observation. And it kind of underscores the importance of their strategy to diversify their product portfolio. They're not putting all their eggs in one basket, so to speak.
Yeah, that's always a smart move.
Yeah.
Speaking of diversification, the earnings call also touched on AMD's long-term vision. And it sounds like AI is going to play a major role in their future.
Absolutely. AMD is making a big bet on AI. And they're not just talking about it, they're actually putting their money where their mouth is. They're investing heavily in developing new AI chips. And they've even created their own software ecosystem called ROCm, which is designed to optimize AI workloads.
Hold on, ROCm. You have to break that one down for me.
Sure. So ROCm stands for Radeon Open Compute Platform. It's essentially a suite of software tools and libraries that help developers get the most out of AMD's hardware, especially when it comes to AI applications. It allows developers to write code once and then run it across a variety of different AMD platforms, from CPUs and GPUs to FPGAs.
FPGAs.
Okay.
Now you're losing me again.
Sorry. FPGAs are field programmable gate arrays. They're basically chips that can be reconfigured after they've been manufactured, which makes them very versatile, especially for tasks like AI processing.
Okay, so they're kind of like customizable chips.
Exactly.
So AMD is throwing CPUs, GPUs, and even these FPGAs at the AI problem. Are they seriously trying to go toe-to-toe with NVIDIA?
It seems that way. They see AI as a massive opportunity, and they believe that their diverse product portfolio and their software ecosystem gives them a unique advantage in this market.
But NVIDIA is the undisputed leader in AI chips right now. Do they really think they can catch up?
Well, it's definitely a David versus Goliath situation. But AMD is making some strategic moves. They're focusing on providing complete solutions, not just individual chips. They're partnering with key players in the AI ecosystem, and they're aggressively targeting specific segments of the market, like data centers.
So they're not trying to take on NVIDIA directly?
Not exactly. They're trying to carve out their own niche in this rapidly growing market.
Makes sense. Okay, so it sounds like they have a plan. But it's going to be a tough battle. Now let's get back to those concerns that were highlighted in the analyst report. What did the earnings call have to say about those potential headwinds that AMD is facing?
Well, they actually addressed those concerns head on. The anticipated sequential decline in revenue for Q1 2025. They attributed that to a couple of factors. First, seasonality.
You mean the usual post-holiday slowdown?
Exactly. And then second, that planned product transition period that we talked about earlier. They're essentially clearing the decks for the launch of the MI350 series later this year, which they expect to be a major growth driver.
So they're taking a short-term hit in order to set themselves up for a stronger second half of the year.
That seems to be the strategy.
Okay. And what about concerns about inventory buildup?
Well, AMD was very clear that the growth they're seeing is driven by genuine product adoption, not an overabundance of inventory.
So they're confident that they can keep the momentum going.
That's the message they're sending.
Okay.
But of course, we always have to remember that this is a complex industry.
Right. No investment is without risk.
Exactly. And one of the details that I found particularly interesting in the analyst report was the section on insider trading.
Oh, insider trading. Always a little bit mysterious, isn't it?
Yeah, it can be. But the report highlighted that several AMD executives have been buying shares recently.
Oh, really? Now we can never know for sure what motivates insider trades.
Right. Sometimes it's just personal financial planning.
Right.
But in this case, the timing of these purchases is interesting because it coincides with AMD's positive earnings report and their optimistic outlook on AI.
So it could be a sign that even those closest to the company are feeling bullish about AMD's future.
It's certainly one interpretation. It's just another piece of the puzzle for investors to consider.
Right, right. Okay, so we've dug into AMD's earnings call, talked about their product lines, their AI ambitions, even their insider trading activity. But before we wrap things up, I want to get your big picture take on AMD. Zoom out for a minute. What's your overall assessment?
Well, I think AMD is at a really fascinating crossroads right now. They're coming off a period of tremendous success, driven by strong performance in key markets like data centers and consumer PCs. And their strategic focus on diversification, particularly their push into AI, really positions them for potential future growth. But it's not all smooth sailing. They still face intense competition, especially from NVIDIA in the AI space. And the cyclical nature of the semiconductor industry means that they're exposed to factors that are beyond their control.
So it's a mixed bag.
I'd say it's more like a high-stakes poker game. AMD's holding some strong cards, but they're also facing some tough competition.
So it's up to each individual investor to decide whether they want to ante up and bet on AMD's future.
Exactly.
We've given you the information,
Yeah.
the analysis, the different perspectives. Now it's your turn to do your own research, weigh the pros and cons, and make your own informed decision.
And as always, we encourage you to share your thoughts and insights in the comments section below. We love hearing from our listeners and engaging in thoughtful discussions about these topics.
Absolutely, because that's what the deep dive is all about. Fostering a community of engaged, informed investors who are passionate about learning and growing together.
Well said.
Now, before we wrap things up, all right, so before we wrap things up, let's circle back to AMD's short-term outlook. Their guidance for Q1 2025 predicts revenue of approximately $7.1 billion.
Which translates to a 30% year-over-year increase. a pretty healthy growth rate, but it does imply a slight sequential decline from their record-breaking Q4.
Yeah, so they're anticipating a bit of a slowdown in the coming months. Is that a reason for concern?
Not necessarily. AMD is attributing this to a couple of factors that we've already discussed. Seasonality, that post-holiday slowdown that often happens in tech, and then also that planned product transition period. They're clearing the way for the launch of their MI350 series later this year.
Right, those powerful new data center GPUs.
Exactly.
So they're taking a breather to prepare for a bigger push later in the year.
That seems to be the strategy.
Okay, and speaking of AI, we've talked a lot about AMD's ambitions in this space. They're projecting tens of billions of dollars in annual AI-related revenue. That's a pretty bold prediction. Do you think they can actually pull it off?
It's definitely ambitious, but I wouldn't count them out. The AI market is growing incredibly fast, and AMD is in a good position to capitalize on that growth. They have a diverse product portfolio, a strong software ecosystem, and they're forming partnerships with some of the major players in the AI space.
But they are going up against some pretty stiff competition. NVIDIA is still the 800-pound gorilla in the AI market.
That's true, but AMD isn't really approaching this as a head-to-head battle with NVIDIA. They're focusing on specific segments of the market where they believe they have a strong advantage, like data centers, for example. And they're offering a more comprehensive approach, providing complete solutions rather than just individual chips.
So they're trying to differentiate themselves by being more than just a chip supplier.
Exactly. They want to be seen as a strategic partner for companies that are looking to implement AI solutions. And their open source software platform, ROCm, gives them a competitive edge because it makes it easier for developers to build and deploy AI applications on AMD hardware.
Okay, so it sounds like they have a solid plan. But we can't ignore the risks. The analyst report highlighted some potential headwinds facing AMD and really the entire semiconductor industry.
Right. There are always external factors that can impact a company's performance. We've talked about the cyclical nature of the semiconductor market, the potential for supply chain disruptions, and then there are always those geopolitical risks looming in the background.
These are factors that AMD can't control, but investors need to be aware of them.
Absolutely. And that's why diversification is so important.
Yeah.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Spread your investments across different sectors, different asset classes, different companies.
Wise words.
Oh.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into AMD, what's the key takeaway for our listeners?
Well, I think the key takeaway is that AMD is a company at an inflection point. They've had a remarkable run of success, driven by strong product execution and strategic positioning in high-growth markets. Their push into AI is ambitious, but it also has the potential to be very rewarding. However, they're also facing significant challenges. Intense competition, external factors that could impact the entire semiconductor industry.
So it's a compelling story with both opportunities and risks.
Exactly, and that's what makes investing so fascinating. It's about analyzing the information, weighing the potential rewards against the inherent risks, and ultimately making informed decisions that align with your own investment goals.
And that's what the deep dive is all about. We're here to give you the insights you need to navigate the complex world of investing. We've analyzed AMD's recent performance, their future prospects, the challenges they face. Now it's your turn to take this information and make your own informed decision.
And be sure to share your thoughts in the comment section below. We always love hearing from our listeners and engaging in thoughtful discussions.
Because at the end of the day, we're all in this together. We're all on a journey to learn, grow, and achieve our financial goals. And we're here to help you every step of the way. So hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss out on our future deep dives into the fascinating world of finance and technology. We've got some amazing topics lined up, and we can't wait to share them with you. Until then, happy investing.